What's going on, Andrew? It's Wednesday. Recently, big car companies like Ford are handing out new ethics tests to their employees. If only they'd given themselves ethics tests before we had to bail them out. Let me just give you an example of what's on this ethic test. Here's a scenario. You work at a dealership and a customer calls in for a price of a part. You call the manufacturer, get the price number, and tell it to the customer. So say it's $800. The customer agrees to that price and says, okay, I'll be in to pick it up later. But when the customer comes to pick it up and you're checking them out, you find out that the price is actually $100 less than you thought it was. And so the question on the test is, what do you do? That's how far we've sunk. Basically, the question is, do you steal or not? Do you steal or not? You want to know the scary part? A large number of people got this question wrong. It's not even ethics. The bar has sunk so low.
Well, they're not too thin and they're not too tall, but if you stick around, we'll have a ball. It's Catawampus Cousins.
If you don't know what ethics is, let me explain. Ethics are like moral principles that help you govern your life. I got that story from a Car Talk podcast. So after I heard this part of the podcast, I started thinking, what is a good ethics question? And I came up with a few. Did you know America is one of the only countries where you're allowed to advertise medication? So in no other country will you see an ad like this.
In some cases, extreme high blood sugar can lead to coma or death.
Antidepressants can increase suicidal thoughts and behaviors in children, teens, and young adults.
If you have high cholesterol, you may be at increased risk of heart attack and stroke.
So you might be thinking to yourself, oh, Kason, that's not too bad. It's just ads. Well, it is bad because when people see these ads, they think, oh, I need this medication. And people take these medications to their doctors, and because the doctors want to please the patients, they force them to write these prescriptions for these drugs these patients don't need, and in some cases is harmful to the patient. Because guess what? These companies that are advertising all these medications don't care about you, they care about money. If I could quote a band whose album is behind me, the drugs you do were made by people who think in dollar signs. So is being able to advertise medication a question of ethics? Yeah, maybe. Especially because people now look at medication as a product instead of a tool that's supposed to help you. And because everyone's confused about how to use medication, everyone's confused about how to use the healthcare system. And because everyone's confused about what's best for healthcare, we can't agree on anything. We're so confused we can't even agree on funding it. And because we can't agree on funding this one thing, nothing gets funded, which means a large part of the government gets shut down completely and thousands of people are out of a job. And because we can't come to a compromise on one thing, these government workers don't have enough money to buy food. Is that a question of ethics? Maybe. A few days ago, 4 soldiers in Afghanistan died, and their bodies were brought back to the States for burial. Now usually when a soldier dies, there's a ceremony and the body is buried in a government burial ground like Arlington. But because there's no funding for anything, there's no burials, which means the government's not going to pay for these bodies to be buried, which means it's left up to the families. But of course, off the weak government pay, the families don't have enough money to pay for a proper funeral, which means there's 4 people, regardless of what they died for, sitting in a coroner's office waiting for funding so they can be buried. And to me, yes, that's a question of ethics. Should you steal $100 almost seems like a hard ethics question compared to should you put a grieving family through more pain. Everyone needs to step up their own ethics test, including the government, because there's clearly one that they don't have on there. Sometimes there are things that are more important than getting your way. And until next time, keep the wrists raised.
Over the wall, boys, infirmary squads are checking the beds for bodies incapable of beating the odds. Silly sods they are, I air my views on a bridge and direct. I'd expect the same from you.